Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Friday Masterclass, where today we are back together, solo, just you and I, talking about mixing sound, one of my true passions, and something that we haven't done yet in this very long series of masterclasses that we've been doing. I want to remind everyone that we're coming across multiple networks today, so hello to everyone across YouTube, Adobe Live, Behance, LinkedIn, and the Twitters. Great to see you all. So we've got a lot of stuff to cover. This is going to be a multi-part sort of edition of this of these masterclasses. Also, by the way, a big shout out to our friends at No Film School who are tuning in as well. And today we're really going to sort of take a broader look at mixing audio in Premiere Pro using a combination of the track mixer as well as the essential sound panel. And we'll probably focus more on the latter, simply because that's really the easiest way to get started with mixing. Now, throughout the course of this, I'm going to be kind of dropping little bits of info here specific to some of the more classic workflows. And like all things in Adobe products, there's always multiple ways to do the same operation. Case in point, you can mix manually with the track mixer, or if you kind of want an automated, sometimes AI-assisted mixing assistant, then you can use the Essential Sound Panel, also known as the ESP, although no one ever says that, and I don't know why. It's such a fun acronym. In any case, a couple of shout outs as always. LinkedIn user. Kimet G, Ibrahim Hajo, great to see you. Jamea Anis, we enjoy every day. Kurt Thurston, Mohammed Jawad Alam, Angela Walker, Basic, Mark Andre, Samar Afzal, great to see you. Well, this is a difficult one. Sparrow Elvins, Yaud Viviano, nice to see you as well. Reverb Mike, Tim, Eugene, Theo, Rick Adams, Mr. Singh, Stephanie, and Rick, great to see you all. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. Oh, of course, before I do, a couple quick reminders here. If you want to be in the chats that are directly in front of my face, this is the one that you want to be at. Of course, No Film School and LinkedIn, I'm watching you through the other side of my face. I need more caffeine or something. B.net/Adobe Live. That way we can see who's watching on Behance and Adobe Live, and we'd love to have you do that and comment. And of course, we're going to have lots of little things going on today. So, you know, I'll answer your questions as we can get to them. But why don't we get right into it? So I'm going to switch over to Premiere Pro. All right, just like that. And here we are. What's up, Clarice and Jose Rivera and Ibrar and Magnus and Ivan and Ishmael and Noel from Charlotte, North Carolina. How's it going? Thank you so much for chiming in, and love that we are back on LinkedIn. By the way, side note, because, you know, I'm very honest with you, I had assumed we'd been streaming to LinkedIn this whole time and it was just very quiet. Apparently, some of the events didn't actually show up on LinkedIn for a very long time. So I'm glad it has somehow been re-released. Oh, and one more thing before I begin. I just want to share this with you because we're back together alone. You know, the last couple of weeks I've had guests, and it's really nice to have guests, and it's really nice to just do it alone. So thank you. I've mentioned in the past that when I started my career in sort of professional music and in the music industry, I was an audio engineer for well over a decade, and my mentor was someone named Roger Nichols, who, if you know anything about audio, if you know, you know. Roger Nichols, 9-time Grammy winner, largely for engineering, best engineered records. He was responsible for all of Steely Dan's records. Truly one of the greatest recording engineers of all time. He was my mentor. He used to refer to me often as his illegitimate son. He was a friend. He was everything to me. And he passed away a little over a decade ago, but I've kept in touch with his family because we are very close. And while I can't talk about exactly any specifics, we are working on a project that hopefully may come to fruition sometime in the near future. And his one of his daughters recently sent me a shirt. I'm just going to show you here. So this, you can see it, Wendell Labs. Now, if you know, you know. Do you know what Wendell is? I want to hear in the chat. If you know what Wendell is, you can kind of get an idea just by looking at it. I'll tell you in a few seconds if no one asks or answers. Does anyone know? How much of an audio nerd are you really? That's what we're testing here. But exciting stuff potentially happening. It's great to be sort of working with his family again. And I just can't tell you enough and emphasize enough how much this man changed my life. in every conceivable way. He was not only an incredible mind, the inventor of so much of the digital technology that we know today in audio, but also just a really wonderful human being. And yeah, he was something else. So I talked about him a lot, but wearing this shirt today, I don't know, it just gives me the feels. CT Ononu, oh, thank you so much, my friend. Yeah, he was just wonderful. Okay, so, oh, and hey, Misty, what's up? All right, so here we are in Premiere Pro. This is a project I've used on a couple of other masterclasses over time. It's called Two Step, and so I did not create this. These are assets that I'm using someone else's production, but it has kind of all the elements of your basic mix to picture. So we've got dialogue, we have the need for some ambient sound. I actually added in some music, some my own, some royalty-free via our Adobe stock audio. And this is currently unmixed, all right? So first we're just gonna take a listen to kind of hear what it sounds like in its essentially raw form. Now, some of this audio has been replaced, also known as ADR, dialogue replacement. Some of it is directly on set. And you'll know that because you can hear a certain level of kind of ambient sound to it. In fact, there's even a moment where one of the actors kind of leans in a bit and you can hear just, however they were doing the boom, they didn't really move with him. So it gets sort of a little bit noticeably clearer and louder, which isn't a bad thing, but maybe better booming next time. But in any case, you're going to get to kind of hear it raw. And then we're going to start to break this down and treat it in a number of different ways. And again, I'm first going to kind of show you some of the traditional things I might do in the track mixer, but then ultimately we're going to focus on this, which is essential sound. All right. Now, next week, we're going to be talking about sound design. That's a little bit different. Okay. That's like sound effects. And again, adding a lot of room ambience and processing to things. This is really kind of a basic overview of mixing. And then the week after that, we're doing something around exporting, and then we're going to come back again and really dive a lot deeper into sort of classic mixing, which you can do very capably in Premiere Pro without ever leaving Premiere Pro. So, again, in a professional environment, what does that mean anymore? A lot of times you'll send out the audio. I love this phrase. You'll send it out. What does that mean anymore? But you do, you'll take all your tracks and you'll give it to somebody else who will often do that mix in Pro Tools or somewhere else. And you can still do that. We have ways to do it. The key here is you can really do everything in Premiere. I mean, there are some limitations in its mixer, and where it has those limitations, you can then augment that with Audition if you want to stay in the sort of Adobe ecosystem. But Premiere is a very capable mixer. It works well, it can be automated, there's lots of functionality here. So we're going to touch on some of that, but also highlight kind of the AI-assisted essential sound panel. All right, let's take a quick listen to this scene here. I'm going to put on headphones so that you don't get any bleed, and take a listen.
But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
If I talked to Amy, she came to see me. You see, she's what they call professional, and you're what they call can't win for losing.
She tell you she took it all? She took the whole damn score?
What she did is she paid me what she owed me for her half. And then you're gonna pay me what you
But I didn't get any of the money. Why do I have to pay you if I don't get any of it?
Oh, you got it, Will. You got it. You just lost it. You just lost it. And that ain't my fault. Besides, I gave you the tools. I gave you the phones. I gave you the scripts. I told you what to do, and I told you how to do it.
But I don't have the money.
But I don't care.
All right, good place to stop. By the way, where I was leaning in right there, and he says, and I told you how to do it. You can hear he's like getting closer to the boom mic. Yeah, which again there's nothing wrong. It's just if I were holding it, you kind of move with him so that it maintains the same distance and ambience and all that. Are most people going to give a hoot? No. This is just me being a super audio nerd. By the way, I love this scene. These actors are awesome. This is not a slight on anybody. I'm just pointing out some of those things. Okay. By the way, I see some answers were coming in. Angela was saying, was Wendell recording software? A couple of people are saying recording software. So Wendell, if you can still see, was the original drum computer. Now, a lot of people think of sort of drum drum machines like the Linn drum. So Roger predated the Linn drum by a couple of years. Actually worked with Roger Linn as well. That's another story. But he created the Wendell, and the Wendell would ultimately provide the drum samples on Steely Dan's Gaucho, and was also able to not only be programmed manually, again, we're talking like 1979, 1980 here, but could also be used as a drum trigger system using 16-bit, 50 kilohertz sampled drum sounds. And it was just amazing. And if you want to hear exactly what it sounds like, okay, there's dozens and dozens of albums that used it. Steely Dan's Gaucho is all Wendell. And it's just something else. And it won a Grammy for Best Engineered Record. And among other things, it was this technology. And Roger, it was all him. I mean, he invented this stuff. He invented stuff in the 70s. Now, again, digital had already come about. You know, I think I've talked about in previous streams, Polar Studios in Sweden, very famously, the first sort of digital studio. ABBA being one of the first bands to actually leverage all of this in the time where we used to refer to recordings as DDD or ADD or AAD. Again, not attention deficit disorder. That meant analog recording, digital mixing, digital processing. Roger had done so much of this work in conceiving and conceptualizing digital mixing boards, digital microphones, which effectively are kind of what USB mics are today, in the 1970s. You know, they called him the Immortal, and there was a reason for that, because his mind was, like many of the greats out there, just beyond, you know, beyond a human understanding. And again, I feel like the kid who got the golden ticket because he shared so much of this knowledge with me. Okay, Jose Bustos. Yes, Jose knows. Bang the drums slowly, River Mike. I believe, actually, in fact, you know, his samples were used on some Todd Rundgren records as well, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so cool. All right, so as we listen to this, you know, ultimately, it's not bad. It's a pretty decent mix. Obviously, we could probably do a little bit of ducking, kind of, right, ducking some of that creepy music underneath the dialogue to make it a little bit more present. We could also probably start using some compression and adding clarity kind of to push that dialogue forward. You know, the main thing is in a scene like this, where it's obviously fairly tense, when you're in a theater in particular, right, you really want to hear all those elements as they're speaking. You want to hear nervousness. You want to hear almost the glottal, those sounds. I'm doing it up to my boom here, because it creates tension, right? So in order to do that, you have to add things like compression and limiting and other things. So this is where we're going to sort of start today. Now, before we get into actually compression, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to mute the music tracks here, all right? And if we go over to the mixer, a couple things to note. So first of all, just like with Photoshop, when I go through my timelines, and this, I actually kind of reorganize this timeline from the original editor. First thing I'll do is, you know, I'll try and separate the dialogue by person on individual tracks. So if you look here, everything is color coded. So track 1, A1 here, represented in purple. Track 1 represents the two characters, Webb and Dwayne. So there were a couple clips where they didn't do dialogue replacement. They did sort of on-set sound. And it's not even that they're both talking at the same time, but there might be just kind of you know, just there's like sound together in this short piece. So I put that on its own track because we're going to treat that separately. The following track, oh, and it looks like I missed 2 of my labels. Good job, doofus, is this character Webb, who's on the right. So I'm going to color code those all rows. Jeez Louise. Be consistent. All right, do that. And track 3 here, represented in cerulean blue, that's Dwayne, all right? This is just gonna make your life a lot easier, right? And similarly, inside of the track mixer, I label everything. Now, you can leave everything, I think that it just defaults to track 1, track 2, whatever, but just like with layers in Photoshop, it's a nightmare if you don't label it, right? Now, you're not gonna have, you know, 600 channels of audio. I pray you don't. If you do, you're doing it wrong. That's a blanket statement. You're doing it wrong. There's too many tracks. Combine a little. It's just nonsense. Not that you can't. Actually, I don't even know what the track limit is. For certain, it's at least 99. Really, though, it's just, it's just unnecessary. You can actually have a lot more tracks once you start creating things like submixes and groups. That's understandable, but you get my point. Anyway, you gotta label, you gotta name things. It behooves, one of my favorite words. It really behooves, it helps you. It's only gonna make the process of mixing and identifying where sound lives. Because remember, I'm sure you've seen, like we do Timeline Tuesdays. When you see the audio mix of even, commercial spots or some of these SNL things, shorts, I see, because they use Premiere and they often do Timeline Tuesdays. I mean, there are way more audio bits many times than video bits, and they're strewn across all different tracks, and you got to know where this stuff is. I see a lot of times, and it's not guilty of doing it. Sometimes I'll do it too. I'll just have one piece of sound design, some kind of a whoosh that's unlike all the other whooshes. And because I want to treat that with a particular effect, it lives on its own track. Again, it's easy to expand that track count. If I don't have that labeled, good luck eyeballing it, because when you kind of just, even show the full 30 seconds, it's just a gazillion little cuts, right? And yes, we have 16 labels, but ultimately it's going to get, a little bit difficult to locate all of those. True Time is asking, can you ask questions about 5.1? You may, in fact. We're not going to be doing 5.1 today, but go ahead. Let's see. Jane is Jane saying something about LinkedIn. Can't push a play button to start the class again. I don't know. That's interesting. Oh, so it only plays live? Strange. Tim Kivy, this is brilliant. Thank you. Benjamin from Ghana. Very welcome. Hello to you. Karen Brisa, great to see you. Whiskey, great to see you. Fahed and Riza. Okay. So labeling, getting things together. All right. The other thing that I highly recommend doing is, the faders all start at 0. Now, dialogue in particular, and the school of thought, I don't even know if there's a school anymore, because the standards have just kind of changed. Not even the standards, it's just the way people do it. Having everything at 0 and then playing everything without doing anything, you run the risk of already over-modulating or just having too much sound, all right? You really almost never want your fader to be at 0, because there's other ways to treat the amplitude of a particular clip. So in general, I'll just start kind of a blanket -3 across all faders. Now, one might say, well, why 3? Well, 3 decibels down, again, it's just going to give you a little bit of headroom, because remember, as you start adding dialogue on top of dialogue, I always use like the Photoshop concept. So you have multiple pieces of dialogue. Then you have ambient sound. Then you have music. Then you have, momentary room tone. As you continually add, all of that ultimately affects your master level. And when we're mixing today digitally, we're working in what's known as a negative logarithmic scale. So actually, and this is, again, a little bit of schooling for you if you're unfamiliar with audio, you may have noticed that on our faders in the tracks here, so on the left side, this is actually sort of an analog representation of decibels, where 0 is right here. You see that? So this kind of represents 0 dB in the analog domain. And then up here you have 15. This is standard sort of on analog mixing consoles, where you have about 15 decibels of headroom. That 15 decibels, however, it's actually a little bit more, is technically 0 dB full scale, because we are mixing digitally. We're not mixing in the analog domain, which means that 0 is as loud as you can get. That's full program loudness, 0 dB FS full scale. And depending upon how you're metering and what bit depth you're working in this case, let's just say 16-bit or technically 24-bit, negative infinity or minus 140 decibels is the quietest signal, okay? So everything is in this kind of negative logarithmic scale. If that is difficult to understand, we will revisit this. But this is something you have to keep in mind, because you don't, if you've ever heard, old school engineers, anyone with graying hair talk about, well, in my day, how they used to push the levels into the red. This is an old concept. You can't do that digitally. I mean, you can, but what happens is it doesn't get warm and beautiful and fat pH sounding. It just starts digitally distorting. And you don't want that. So you want to be mindful of that. So by dropping everything to -3 dB on the fader, again, we're talking the left side here, a little more traditional, it's just going to give you a little bit more room to work with, all right? It's a good starting point. And you can see in some cases, like this other music track, that's providing some of that really weird, creepy stuff. I recorded these creepy choirs super hot, very, very loud. So I just dropped that like way down, -24, right? This other ADR track, it was recorded very quiet. So I left it a little closer to 0 because the amplitude on the track itself, before processing, was very, very quiet. I couldn't even hear it if I dropped it to -3, -6. So it's not an absolute rule, but it's a good way when you're getting started. Just drop all those faders to around -3 and then begin sort of readjusting, all right? It also kind of keeps you in check when you get to later on down the line in your mixing. You're like, God, why is everything peaking? Why is everything so loud? Well, if you've already attenuated everything in the first place, again, you're giving yourself a little more latitude to work with. No reason you can't do -6, all right? -6 works too. Now, if we're talking one dialogue track and one piece of music, make the dialogue -6. And if the music is like commercial music, you know, if you're using the latest, who did I say just came out with something? There's my knowledge of modern stuff. I don't know, whatever. Beatles Let It Be, it's mixed modern, right? It's loud. If I put that in against dialogue, it's going to be way louder. So I'd probably even have to drop that music more than -6, okay? It's just a good idea. It's a good practice. You don't have to do it. Do what you want, but it's a good practice. Okay. The slider goes to 11. Yes, Tim. All right, very good. Okay, just checking on some of the questions here. Angela Walker, can you use royalty-free Adobe stock music on YouTube? Looking for ambient background music but confused by copyright. What decibel level do you recommend for background ambience? Angela, first question. Yes, you absolutely can. That is the whole idea behind Adobe stock. When you license it, and you're going through one of our partners, you are enabling yourself to use that on YouTube. And it actually, there's a process behind the scenes that happens, but yes, you're able to do that. As far as decibel level for recommended background ambience, that's going to vary based on the scene, based on what it is. And you're going to see me do a little bit of that in just a couple of moments, all right? Okay. Will Engel, I've been wanting to make a video on gain staging. It's so important, incredibly. I think we've talked about this many times, Will. I know gain staging is, again, we're not going to talk about that today. This is more on how you capture audio for those just tuning in, right? I just talked about sometimes dialogue is way too quiet. We get a little spoiled in the modern digital domain because we have so much headroom to work with. Some people record things way too hot unnecessarily. Some people record things too quietly. It's about really finding that balance and maximizing the format that you're recording into. So that will be in another class. Someone else is asking, will I be doing a 5.1 Masterclass again soon? Maybe, but I have one on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jason Levine video. I believe I have several different episodes in my Audio 101 playlist, as well as some others that talk about the 5.1 workflow in Premiere and Audition as well. Okay, so back in the mixer here. We've got everything labeled. We've got our faders dropped. Again, for those of you new, a couple of standard controls here. I'm actually going bottom to top. This is in reverse order. MSR mute. Mute's the track, solo's the track, R if we were recording, doing voiceover directly into the track. We have our pan knob here, all right, left and right in stereo. By the way, I disabled my noise reduction that I normally run on my mics here because we might be panning some things in stereo. This is showing your track output assignment. This is showing your track input assignment up at the top here. And then you have this little show hide effects and sends. And this is one of the things that, if you've never used the track mixer and you're like, well, where do I put effects and stuff? How come I don't see it? You have to twirl this down. And when you do that, that's going to reveal to you your effects inserts and your effects sends, all right? Now, again, I'm only going to touch upon this today because I want to focus more on essential sound, but we are first going to do a little bit of work in there. Real quickly, what are effects inserts? So this allows you to place an effect directly on a track. And by placing that effect on a track, essentially what the effects insert does is it sends the audio from that track to the effect and sends it right back. Simple, okay? In a more traditional mixing environment, you inserted really only certain types of effects. You would insert things like a compressor, something that's going to affect the amplitude. You're sending it to the effect and you're sending it right back. And you're using the processor to control elements of the amplitude. You would also often insert things like equalization or equalizers. Sometimes maybe you would insert things like tape delay. This could also be used on in other formats like groups or submixes. Not going to touch upon that too much today. Typically, you wouldn't insert things like a reverb. You could, but again, it means that you're sending all that audio to a reverb and then sending it back. And you have no way to really control the reverberated signal and the dry signal because you would have to control it on the device itself. Now, when we're doing this kind of virtually like this, you do have, there's just more ease in controlling the balance of what we call wet signal and dry signal. Dry signal is the original unprocessed signal. Wet signal is the signal with the effect, whatever it is, compression, EQ, reverb, delay, etc. So you can insert, we allow you to insert all of the various effects in Premiere Pro, all right? So this includes things like, again, I talked about compression. So if I wanted to add a compressor, we'll come back to this in a second, or delays and echo, or all of our various equalizers, and there are many of them. And some of these they've been in here for a long time. Some of these, frankly, not great. Don't use them. If you want sort of the de facto, what sounds good and what works on kind of, what can you use on anything? It's this one here, the parametric equalizer. FFT filter is wonderful, very specific. I'm not going to touch on that today. Graphic equalizer, this is kind of classic. If you had parents who had the little silver, often like Sony EQs on their stereo systems in the 80s and 90s with sliders, 10 bands would mean 10 sliders, 20 bands, 20 sliders, 30 band, 30 sliders. These are fine. They sound okay. They're not my favorites. I've talked about this a lot. High pass, low pass, again, very specific. You have high pass, low pass in the parametric equalizer, and I don't think these sound particularly great. And then you have a bunch of others here, simple parametric, treble, bass. Don't use those. They're just not good. How do I really feel? Use them if you like, but don't. Modulation effects, chorus, flanger, phaser. Let you hear a little bit of that in a second. Now, here we have like things like noise reduction. Now, this is something you would often, in sort of the modern domain, insert. Something like denoise, right? We want to sort of denoise all of the clips on a certain track, right? Simultaneously, real time, good opportunity to do that here. Now, we're going to do this in Essential Sound, but you could also add a denoiser here. We also have the de-reverb, which, as I've discussed in previous live streams, is really, it's an ambience attenuator, right? To say de-reverb, I mean, I guess that's more, you're more likely to understand kind of conceptually what it does. But there are limitations, all right? If you're trying to remove kind of echoey ambience from like you've been recording in a kitchen or a bathroom or a room that is not sound treated, the de-reverb can often, many times, very successfully, just remove some of that harsh reflectivity and ambience. That's a good thing to insert, all right? As mentioned, reverb, and then we have, all these other various effects here, pitch shifting, stereo expansion. All of these things, actually, stereo expansion and pitch shifting makes sense as an insert, right? You want to send a clip, all the clips in that track, to that pitch shifter, affect them all universally, and then send the signal right back, all right? That's the concept of effects inserts. And you'll see that I already have some inserts on the music. I have some parametric EQ and some reverb on these music tracks here. Again, just to kind of take some of the edge off so they work a little bit better with some of the dialogue, okay? Now, as we're listening to this dialogue, I'm going to play some of this back here so you can kind of hear it raw. Someone was just asking about ambient sound. This is kind of an essential part of working with dialogue, is preserving some of the ambience, all right? Now, when you do dialogue replacement, part of what makes it work is, yes, you do want it to line up with the lips, right? But you also need to replace the environment that the people are in. It's a huge mistake to have super clear. You've seen this actually in shows and things. I was just watching an episode of, I think it was New Girl, and clearly it was a scene where like they had to redo the dialogue, and it was probably, it's Hollywood, so it's like, we're late, we got to get this to air. Back in the TV airing days, this is pre-Netflix and all that. We had to do this dialogue replacement. We don't have time to mix it and get it sounding exact. So there was this scene where, like, again, they're in this loft and there is kind of this ambient, roomy sound, and then it cuts back to one of the characters. Now the lip sync was great, but it was so very clearly like done in a studio, and they didn't process it, and it takes you out of the whole scene. So part of the thing that you're trying to do when you're mixing dialogue is, obviously preserving the clarity of the voice, but also in many cases preserving the ambience. And sometimes you have to take the ambience out if it's too much, and then put it back in so that you're sort of living in the scene. That's a lot of words. Let's take a listen to what this dialogue sounds like cleanly, all right? And actually, I'm going to skip ahead a bit because we've got this piece of ADR right down here, and this is going to be sort of the first feature of this.
She tell you she took it all? She took the whole damn score?
What she did is she paid me what she owed me for her half. And now you're going to pay me what you
But
owe.
I didn't get any of the money. Why do I have to pay you if I don't get any of it?
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. You just lost it.
Okay, so right here, now again, Dwayne is off camera here, and he says, "You got it, Webb, you got it." And then it cuts to the ambient recording, which is clearly the boom mic on Webb, who we see in the shot. And you can hear the character who's in the foreground here is a little further back. It sounds a little more kind of roomy, mid-rangey, because he's off mic, right? So the ADR version, which is here.
I didn't get any of it.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Webb, you got it. You just lost it.
Now, I've already done a little balancing to make it sort of kind of fit. But if you're listening critically, you can tell that there's something missing. And what's missing is that we need a little bit more. I left some of the room tone from the previous clip here.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it.
But we almost need a little bit more. All right. So I'm going to show you this real quickly. This is kind of a back and forth workflow. If you don't have room tone, and this is something that we talked about weeks back, when you're on set, and the set could be your room, it could be here, and you're recording yourself or someone else, it is you must do this. If you're going to be editing sound, you should always capture 10, 20 seconds of just what the room sounds like when no one's talking. Because in the event that you have to do some tweaking or maybe removing some plosives or re-EQ or do something a little more drastic, by having that sound of the room, when you put it back underneath the dialogue, again, it's just going to magically kind of glue things together. Now, you still might need to do a little bit of tweaking, but it just helps to kind of put replaced dialogue back into the exact same environment. Now, can you recreate that with reverb effects? Absolutely. In fact, I'm probably going to need to do that anyway, just to give it a little bit more ambience. But having kind of the noise, and I do mean the noise of the room, right? Silence, there's noise in silence, right? Is just going to kind of keep you in that scene. So here I have this clip that has some room tone on it. If I just do edit clip in Adobe Audition, all right, and I come over here, all right, and we're in Audition, and I play this back.
You just lost it.
So right here. Now I'm just going to amplify this real quickly for a second because you're probably not hearing it. All right. Are you? Okay. Now that's 30 decibels louder. We're not going to leave it 30 decibels, right? It should be 30 decibels quieter. But having that just the little hums, the little zzz, maybe there was some AC. Again, it's not really anything that you perceive in the scene necessarily, especially with music going on, but it's going to help when you do that dialogue replacement to just keep things a little bit more consistent, all right? You're not always going to use it. Sometimes you use it in between speech, not necessarily underneath. Always a good idea to have some room tone. So one easy way to do that is just highlight that section, listen to it, copy it to a new file, all right? select the whole thing, because this is like half a second. That's way too short. You're just going to wind up, you know, like repeating it a million times in Premiere, and that's super annoying. So I'm going to copy this, go to the end of it, and paste it. Go to the end of it, paste it, go to the end of it, paste it, go to the end of it, paste it. You can even paste in the middle. You know, you could paste any, actually, I even recommend doing that because it's going to give you slightly more of a randomized kind of feel. So now you're not going to hear this over the stream. Maybe you will. All right. Now we just have some consistent room tone. All right. So again, we can file, save, bring this back into Premiere. Now I already went ahead and did this. I've already got this room tone loop, which you can see here. All right. And you can bring this into your tracks, and I could place this right about here. All right. Play this back now.
Get any of it.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it.
Now again, I don't know how much of that is coming through, but let me just mute this for a second. Here it is without.
Get any of it.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it.
You can hear the difference between the ADR and that, again, that off-camera dialogue. Now when I bring this back in.
Any of it.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it.
All right. Now the slight differences in amplitude, we're going to fix that with compression. But if you could hear this as clearly, he's now in the same environment, right? And we could even probably attenuate that room tone just a little bit on its own. We can do that just by coming over to the clip here, grabbing our little, oops, you can't see the tooltip there. I'm off screen. Whoops, sorry. Do that again. So there's my little decibel level here. Probably drop that just about dB and a half. All right, a little more than a dB and a half. All right, just to make it a little bit smoother. Now, talking about applying effects, let's come back to a couple things here. I'm going to mute these 3 tracks. Talking about insert effects, because then we got to get to essential sound. All right. On this music that you see here, I have a parametric equalizer and a studio reverb. I'm going to turn these off. By the way, this is your effects bypass in Premiere. All right, and this is what the original music sounded like.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it.
Oh, actually, you know what? This is Fred Fung. This is not Adobe stock. This is my buddy Fred. I forgot. Okay. So it's kind of mid-rangey, it's kind of bright. It's kind of a lot in that mid-range where, and I saw Will just made that point. It's in the same range. It's got a lot of the same resonant frequencies as voice, as dialogue. So that means that the dialogue itself is not going to come through very clearly because the music itself is kind of occupying that space. So now I didn't do a scoop out. All right. We'll talk about this more another time. I actually just rolled off pretty harshly. Again, now this is using a low-pass filter as part of the parametric equalizer. I can't emphasize enough, as far as native equalization goes inside of Premiere, this is the best one. This is the most musical sounding one. This is the one that sounds the least harsh, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, some EQs just sound a little digital. This one actually has a characteristic of a very warm analog device, which is a good thing. Works well on vocals and music. And you can see I'm cutting at 30 decibels per octave, everything above 652 hertz. Low pass filter means it allows low frequency to pass through, high frequency cut. A high pass filter is the opposite. It allows high frequency to come through and low frequencies are cut. All right? Kind of a bit of an opposite there. So if we turn that back on, let's play it again. Turn it on. Right? So if I'm trying to talk over this, it's so bright. It's in the same range. But if I try and talk over this, well, now my voice just kind of comes through, right? Because I've removed all of that harshness. All right? Simple old school trick. Not even a trick, it's just a technique, okay? And then similarly here, I've got some reverb just to add a little bit of ambience. This may be a little less intelligible, but we're going to come back to it because we're going to do a bit of that on the dialogue now as an insert. So down below, if we unmute this.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it.
All right. And I almost need to adjust the timing. I'm not going to worry about the timing right now. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to set an in point. I'm going to set an out point. And we're going to like loop play back this section. And I'm going to insert a little bit of ambient reverb here using the studio reverb effect. And the reason for that is that, again, I'm just trying to kind of tweak the room sound of that replaced dialogue because it was obviously done offset, close mic'd, and it just doesn't sound quite right. All right. Now, you got a lot of different settings in here. I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly. All right. First of all, we'll leave the room size at 70. Big kitchen, probably a slightly bigger room. I'll just leave that as the default. That's probably fine. Now, decay, 2,500 milliseconds is way too much. That's 2.5 seconds of room echo. That's way too much. Early reflection, this is how much of the reverb you sort of hear almost simultaneously, slightly before as the person's talking, right? When you're in a room, as you say words, things are bouncing off the walls and they're kind of reflecting back. So we want a little bit of that reflection because this is an ambient space. Width is sort of stereo. We don't need any of that. All the dialogue is sort of centered in mono, so we're going to drop this way down. High frequency cut, we're going to do this live. This is, again, how much of that high frequency we're rolling off. This is kind of a mid-rangey kitchen. So it's not super bright, it's more in the mid-range. Similarly, we've got low frequency cut. We can probably leave that at the default. Damping and diffusion, I'll leave those at 50-50. And then the main thing here is playing around with the wet-dry balance. So let me start to kind of tweak through this and let's see what we come up with.
Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it.
All right, now already I can hear there's too much echo. There's too much decay. So I'm going to drop that. I'm going to start tweaking this as we go.
You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it.
All right. So you can see we're starting to add some of those characteristics back in there. I might even drop the wet just a little. But once I add compression on two of those and even out the dynamics, and you saw I turned back on the room tone, I was like, something else is missing. I needed that warm room tone. Once I do that, and I might even amplify the warmth on this, and in fact, I'm gonna cut this off, and I'm going to do a slight little fade right here so that this room tone isn't repeated because it's already on the track above. All right, so let's kind of fade this out right as it goes into his other, you just lost it. All right.
Got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it. Oh, you got it, Webb. You got it. You just lost it.
All right. It's probably not coming through super clearly because I know there's like fan noise and whatnot. It's amazing. No. It's a good start, okay? So, and this is an inserted reverb. Now, if all of this is seeming sort of complex and scary to you, yeah, it is a little bit of that. And for our last 12 minutes here, this is where we're going to talk about the ease of using Essential Sound. Okay, so the Essential Sound panel is just that. It lets you perform kind of mixing essentials with a very low lift and a very, you don't need a lot of audio knowledge to be able to do this. Essentially, the way that it works, is that you tag the various types of media that you have, all right? In this case, dialogue, music, sound effects, ambience. You tag those clips, and then once you do that, it's going to reveal to you all of the common things that you would often use to process that audio, all right? So for starters, now I could select all of the dialogue here and choose dialogue. This is often what I will do. Now, just to because we're not going to have time to go through all of this, let's just choose the first guy. So the guy we're looking at there, that's Webb. All right. Right, that is Webb, right? Yeah, track 2, Webb. Okay, yes. So we're going to choose him, all of the rose-colored dialogue clips, and we're going to tag them as dialogue. Now, when we do that, it's going to reveal a whole series of things. Now, there's a lot of stuff in here. We're going to recover this again. We're going to cover this again in another episode. I want to talk very briefly about a couple of these. We're going to focus on 2 today. The first one is auto match loudness. All right. Now, this is wonderful if you have a whole series of dialogue clips that are, for the most part, at sort of differing levels. Remember I talked about the ADR was very quiet, but the boomed audio was sort of nominal, normal. All right. What that does, auto match, is it analyzes using AI, and it goes, okay, this is here, this is here, this one's here, this one's here. This is also very useful with multiple actors, right? Multiple actors, different levels of amplitude in their speech. So it analyzes all of them, and then it just kind of makes them all about the same apparent loudness, okay? Loudness, the way that we perceive them. Now you might think, why don't I always do this? Well, for one, this stuff it's already been kind of processed. I didn't get the original master, so some of this has been tweaked. Some of it was tweaked outside of Premiere in the first place. It's a good process, and I recommend you trying it out. Here's the cool thing about it. It's a single button click, just like that. Where I use this the most, now I don't necessarily use it for dialogue, because if I'm recording the dialogue, I know where I'm at. I don't want anybody messing with my amplitude but me. Music, however, if you're going to have, again, creepy, all this weird stuff that I've got down here, some of it, my buddy Fred, you can just see these tracks. They're mixed, super, super hot. Right, and then I recorded these choirs. These are not as hot. You just look at the density of the waveform. Okay, auto matching loudness on music is very useful because, you know, again, you'll cut to a scene and maybe it's creepy ambient music like this, you know, ominous kind of sounding. But then the next scene is driving down the highway and it's like, you know, some rock music. Well, if all of your music tracks are like, again, depends on where they're coming from, where they're sourced. Maybe you have classical, maybe you have jazz, maybe you just have single note, ominous. Dun. Now you're being forced to have to adjust levels a lot more manually. If you use auto match on music, it just automatically analyzes everything and says, okay, everything's kind of at the same basic loudness level. You still have to tweak how much of it you want in the scene, but it just makes it a lot easier, okay? So that's what auto match loudness does. All right, repair. Again, we're not going to get into this today because I'm going to do a whole separate thing on noise reduction and hum reduction and rumble removal. Here's the amazing thing about this. This will remove ambient noise, fan noise, air conditioner noise, onset hums and things, anything that's consistent with a single slider. That's all you need to know about these. I'm not going to showcase these today, but that's all you need to know, all right? This is awesome. You don't need to know anything about, well, what frequencies is it? You do need to understand that noise is all the things I just described. That's what that type of noise is. So like HVAC, again, air conditioner, fan, even it could be a car motor or some kind of motor. You might have to use a combination of noise reduction and rumble reduction. Rumble is going to be very low frequency noise. De-hum is just that. And you'll see this is specific. This is not motor hum, because someone's like, yeah, well, my motor purrs. That's not what I'm talking about. 50 cycle, if you're on, as we say, you know, the other side of the pond. 60 cycle, if you're on this side of the pond, okay? This is specific to removing electrical hum. You can overdo this very easily, but it's a single slider. So you just adjust it until you hear it gone. De-essing, that's removing sibilance, right? Very commonly, particularly with boom recordings or lav recordings, someone's talking on camera, you're doing an interview, and every time they say Tennessee, it feels like your eardrum is being sliced with a knife. You need some sibilance attenuation. That's what de-essing does, all right? And then reduce reverb is what I described before. It kind of takes the edge off of some room ambience, all right? The one we're going to focus on right now, though, is clarity. And specifically, this is around dynamics. Now, I pulled up this little overlay for you. I'm not going to be able to get into how to set compression manually today. But if you want to learn more about how to use a manual compressor, whoops, wrong direction. It's there. There. bit.ly/Jace compression. This will take you to a fairly old video of mine. Now, I'm probably going to have to watch it at 1.5x because it was from a live stream. It is not chapterized and it's long. But you watch this, you will know how to set an audio compressor precisely, okay? A lot of people that I know in the biz have used that very tutorial and then made their own using my exact language. I just take it as a compliment because it is, in fact, flattery, as they say. bit.ly/Jace compression, you will know what I'm talking about. Here, you don't need to know anything about setting a compressor. It's a single slider. So let's zoom back out here. And on this dialogue, I'm going to turn on dynamics, okay? Now, these are short clips, so we're going to have to listen sort of carefully. All right, let me actually, here, I'll do an in to out on this. All right, we're going to just highlight this.
I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
All right, so we're going to do an in to out, and I'm going to start adjusting that dynamic slider, and I want you to hear how it's just going to start to push that dialogue forward. All right, take a listen.
But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all. But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all. But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
Okay, now you might be thinking, well, it just sounds like it's louder. It is louder. But more importantly, this is using, I've said it many times, some of the best AI, some of the best machine learning that we have in all of our products. Because what it's doing is it's analyzing not just the amplitude, but it's analyzing the threshold, the point at which compression begins for the entire clip. And then it's dynamically applying this compressor to it. So it's not only just making it louder, but it's keeping it from distorting and it's bringing it more into focus. Now, where this really comes into play is when you start using what's known as ducking, right? Because remember, we've got this music underneath here.
But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
Now let's kill it. Ready?
But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all. But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
All right. Notice how it's kind of just sitting on top of it very, very comfortably, very, very nicely. All right, I'm going to select the other three here, and I'm going to do that same level of compression, about 6.8. So they all have the same level of dynamics. Now, that sounds good in and of itself, but we still need to bring that music down just a little bit. And specifically when he's talking, we want it to dip down maybe a little bit. Now, you can do that with a fader. By the way, notice we adjusted amplitude without touching the mixer. We're not touching the faders. We're just using that slider. This is another reason why you want to attenuate those faders before you start to give yourself more headroom. If you see things going into the red here above 0, your stuff is too loud. Drop those faders, okay? Drop them down. We're gonna skip ahead because we've got 3 minutes here, all right? This is for the fast, for the quick. I'm gonna select both music tracks here, all right? I'm gonna tag these as music. And I'm going to turn on ducking, all right? Ducking. What does ducking do? It is automatically, when it, again, AI senses that there is dialogue. Now, by the way, you can duck against dialogue or other music or sound effects or whatever, all right? When it senses that, it's going to drop the music automatically. The sensing is this sensitivity slider. The duck amount is this is how much it attenuates. And then the fade duration is how quickly it drops down and then how quickly it returns when the person stops talking, all right? So if I play this now, let's click on Generate Keyframes. All right, it's doing its thing. And if you look, you can see that it has automatically basically created a fade curve for you against dialogue. Now, this is, again, another example where I'm just going to very quickly, I'm going to select our other friend's dialogue here. tag it as dialogue, turn on dynamics. I'm going to give him about the same level. He was a little bit louder, so I'm going to give him about 5.8. All right. Then I'm going to come back to the music here, and let's regenerate keyframes. Okay. So that it's now ducking against him as well. Let's hope it's doing that. What is it saying? That's fine. There we go. Okay. All right. And if we now take a listen here, let's clear the in to the out. Play it back.
But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
Well, I talked to Amy.
All right, now you can see it's kind of moving in and out a little bit too much. So this is where we want to adjust that sensitivity. So maybe I adjust the sensitivity. Maybe I shorten the fade duration. And now I'm going to generate keyframes again. And it should reconfigure that momentarily. And you see it just did. It just changed how that works. So now when we play it back.
But Dwayne, I don't even have any of the money. Amy she split and took it all.
Well, I talked to Amy.
Okay. Now, we don't necessarily want it to ramp back up in the silent sections, but the idea is that now you have the ability to do that. You can readjust those keyframes manually, and you have complete control. Unfortunately, friends, we are out of time. So much more that I can show you here. Stay tuned for next week. Sound design, lots more audio. We've got the DCC coming up, so have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.